The Howling Gate was opened only when the kingdom needed someone to die loudly enough to calm its fear. So when they chained Elaria moonless beneath the blood moon and left her facing the enemy forest, every wolf on the wall understood the sentence. She was not bait. She was proof. If the northern packs tore her apart, the court would say the curse had finally been answered. If they crossed the gate for her, the court would say she had summoned them. Either way, Elaria would become the reason war had returned. Silver shackles bit into her wrists, fastening her arms to the iron rings of the massive black gate. The metal was old, carved with wolf prayers and conquest marks, cold enough to burn. Blood slid down her fingers and dropped onto the snow-dark stone below. Behind her, the soldiers of Valkyrin lined the battlements with drawn bows. Before her, beyond the iron bars, the enemy forest waited. No birds moved there. No wind shook the black pines. Only the moon watched, huge and red above the trees, staining the snow like watered blood. Elaria kept her head raised. That was all she had left. Lord Commander Varesh stood on the wall above her in a wolf fur mantle, his iron-gray hair braided for battle, his voice carrying easily over the gathered soldiers and nobles. Behold, the woman who called the enemy home. A murmur passed over the wall. Cursed woman. War-marked. Moonless. Elaria had heard every name since childhood. She had not been found in a forest like an abandoned child from a sad song. She had been found as an infant inside the old chain wheel of the Howling Gate, wrapped in a torn queen's battle banner no one in Valkyrin admitted recognizing. The wheel had been locked for years, yet when the gate guards heard crying beneath the iron teeth, they discovered her there with a crescent-shaped black mark under her collarbone and a baby shackle still closed around one wrist. The healers called the mark a war omen. The priests said it pulsed whenever enemy wolves drew near. The court decided that meant she belonged to whatever darkness waited beyond the gate. No one asked why an infant would carry a war mark before she had learned to speak. No one asked why the torn banner around her body had been hidden in the royal archive by morning. No one asked why the baby shackle was melted on one side, as if someone had tried to break it with moonfire. Alpha King Dacian Vale stood beside Varesh on the battlement, black cloak snapping in the cold. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dangerously still, with dark hair, a hard jaw, and gold eyes that reflected the blood moon without softening. His armor was black wolf steel. His crown was a narrow band of silver claws. He had not spoken since Elaria was dragged to the gate. That silence hurt more than she wanted it to. Once, months ago, she had tended a wounded white pup in the lower stables after a cruel stablemaster left it to freeze. Dacian had found her there, kneeling in straw with the pup tucked under her cloak. He had watched her hands gentle, careful, patient with pain, and asked why she would save a beast that would never belong to her. Elaria had answered, "Because pain does not need to belong to me before I recognize it." He had looked at her strangely then, as if those words had reached a locked room inside him. Tonight, he watched her bleed, but Elaria knew why he did not simply stop it. 3 border towers had burned in 1 week. 2 noble houses had threatened to withdraw soldiers if the king did not punish the war-marked woman. The southern lords were already whispering that Dacian's mercy had invited invasion, and Varesh was not merely a commander. He was the man who had carried Dacian out of the northern battlefield 10 years ago, half dead and surrounded by enemy wolves, when the old king's army broke under a red moon. Dacian owed him life. The kingdom owed him victory. That made his lies harder to strike. Varesh lifted a sealed scroll. 3 border towers burned this week. 6 scouts were found dead with moon-black fur in their mouths. A northern horncall was found hidden beneath the prisoner's bedding. Enemy fur was stitched into the inner seam of her cloak. And before he died, Scout Rennick spoke one name. He paused. The wall leaned toward him. Elaria. Her stomach turned cold. "That is false," she said. Varesh did not look at her. "The dead do not lie." "No," she answered. but the living often speak for them. A few soldiers shifted. Dacian's gaze sharpened. Varesh's mouth tightened. Search her mark. One priest climbed down from the side stair carrying a silver lantern. He approached Elaria with careful disgust and pulled the collar of her dress aside far enough to expose the crescent beneath her collarbone. The black mark burned. Elaria gasped despite herself. Silver light crawled along the crescent's edge, hot and sharp, pulsing in time with the enemy horns beginning to sound beyond the forest. The wall erupted. Var Omen. She is calling them. Open the gate. Elaria stared down at her own skin in horror. Then she smelled it. Not magic. Ash. A thin smear of moon-black ash had been rubbed around the mark, hidden beneath the dirt and blood from her arrest. She knew that ash. Stable boys used it in winter to make signal brands flare when horns sounded near the watchtowers. Someone had painted her curse to perform. Elaria looked up at Varesh. He was watching her, not with surprise, but warning. Dacian saw the look. His voice finally cut through the night. Who touched her? Before she was brought here. The wall went still. Varesh turned toward him. Your Majesty, you heard me. Varesh bowed his head. Priests examined the mark. Guards searched her chamber. The evidence was witnessed properly. By men under your command. A dangerous silence followed. Varesh's eyes hardened just enough to reveal the steel beneath ceremony. Your Majesty. If we argue process while northern wolves gather, the houses will call it weakness. And if we execute a woman on stage dash, then we prevent civil war. The answer came too quickly. Elaria felt the cold deepen. Dacian did too. But Varesh had chosen his battlefield well. Behind him stood frightened nobles, angry soldiers, priests with blood moon scriptures, and a kingdom desperate for one body to blame. Varesh lifted his voice. Let the curse speak for itself. If she is innocent, the enemy wolves will ignore her. If she belongs to them, they will come. Elaria laughed once. It was small, bitter, and wrong for the moment. Every head turned toward her. Varesh's mouth tightened. You find judgment amusing? No, she said, voice hoarse from cold. Only familiar. Dacian's gaze lowered to her bleeding wrists. Elaria lifted them as much as the chains allowed. When a cursed woman lives, it is mercy. When she bleeds, it is proof. When she dies, it is justice. You have made a very clean law, Commander. The wall fell silent. For one breath, pride warmed her more than fear. Then Varesh leaned over the battlement, opened the gate. The outer bars rose. The sound rolled across the snow like a beast waking. Beyond the threshold, the enemy forest answered. A howl rose from the trees. Then another. Then hundreds. The soldiers drew back their bows. Elaria's mark burned fiercely, but now she knew part of that burn was ash. Fraud. Theater. Beneath the false flare, something older stirred. Not pain alone. Recognition. The black crescent under her collarbone heated beneath her skin, and for the first time in her life the shape changed. The broken curve completed itself in silver fire. Not a curse. A moon pack sigil. Dacian saw it. His face changed. Varesh shouted, Archers, ready! The first enemy wolf stepped from the forest. It was enormous, silver gray, scarred across one eye, carrying something small in its mouth. Not a weapon. A shin, tiny, broken, made for an infant's wrist. Elaria stopped breathing. The wolf crossed the snow alone, lowered its head, and laid the baby chain at her bleeding feet. Then it knelt. Another wolf emerged. Then another. Hundreds of enemy wolves poured from the forest beneath the blood moon, silent as ghosts, each carrying a broken baby chain, a torn cradle ribbon, a melted infant shackle, or a strip of gray battle banner in its mouth. None attacked. None crossed to the soldiers. They came to Elaria. One by one, they knelt before the woman chained to the Howling Gate. On the battlement, The Alpha King stared down in horror, not at the wolves, at the chains, because one of them bore the royal seal of Valkyrin, and from the enemy forest, an old wolf voice called through the night, "Return the Queen's stolen child." The words crossed the snow louder than any war horn. Return the Queen's stolen child. Every bough on the battlement wavered. Elaria stood, chained to the Howling Gate, blood running from her wrists, while hundreds of enemy wolves knelt before her beneath the red moon. At her feet lay tiny broken chains, melted infant shackles, torn gray ribbons, and strips of battle banner, darkened by age. Not trophies, not threats. Evidence. The silver-gray wolf at the front lifted its scarred head and looked past Elaria, up toward the wall, its one good eye fixed on Alpha King Dacian. The king did not move, but Elaria saw the shock strike him like a blade. Lord Commander Varesh recovered first. "Trickery!" he shouted. "Northern beasts bring toys and rags, and you all forget their teeth?" The soldiers stiffened at his voice. Fear was easier to obey than wonder. Varesh raised his arm. "Archers, aim." The wolves did not rise. They remained kneeling. That made the command harder. One young soldier lowered his bow by an inch. "Commander, they are not attacking." Varesh turned so sharply the boy flinched. "Because they are waiting for her signal." Ilaria's mark burned beneath her collarbone, but the silver shape no longer felt like punishment. It pulsed in answer to the kneeling wolves, as if something in her blood had been sleeping under the wrong name and was finally hearing its own language. Dacian looked down at the baby chains. "Hold fear." Varesh's face hardened. "Your Majesty." I said hold. The wall obeyed. Not calmly, but it obeyed. Dacian descended the battlement steps with his black cloak snapping behind him. Varesh followed, anger tight beneath every measured movement. By the time they reached the inner side of the gate, Ilaria's knees had begun to shake from cold and blood loss, but she forced herself not to sag against the chains. Dacian stopped in front of her. This close, she saw the exhaustion beneath his authority. The red moon carved harsh shadows under his eyes. His hand hovered near the shackle at her wrist, then stopped, because every wolf beyond the bars watched him, because every soldier behind him watched too, because touching her now would no longer be mercy. It would be a choice. "What did they call you?" Dacian asked quietly. Elaria almost laughed. "Tonight? Curse. War. Mark. Bait." His jaw tightened. Before that, she looked down at the baby chain, with the royal seal half buried in snow. "Moonless." The silver-gray wolf growled, not at her, at the name. Varesh stepped forward. "Enough. This is how the northern packs ensnare kings. They kneel first, then they gut men when pity opens the gate." Dacian did not look at him. "Why would one of these chains bear Valkyrin's seal?" Varesh's answer came too smoothly. "Spoils from the old war. That chain was made for an infant. Royal houses chained enemy heirs after conquest. Your father's court was not gentle." Elaria looked up. Dacian's face changed, not with surprise, but with old pain. There was truth in that, and Varesh knew exactly where to press it. The old king had conquered the northern moon pack 20 years ago. Valkyrin's histories called it a defensive victory. The northern survivors called it slaughter. Dacian had been a boy then. Varesh had been the war hero who brought him home alive. The scarred wolf outside the gate lowered its head and pushed another object through the bars with its muzzle. A small piece of bone-white wood, a cradle-tay. The name carved on it had been burned nearly away. Only 3 letters remained. Illa. Elaria stared at it. The world narrowed to those letters. Her breath came shallowly. Varesh snatched the tag before Dacian could reach it. "A planted relic." Ilaria's voice broke. "Give it back." Varesh looked at her then, and for one heartbeat she saw the truth in his eyes. He recognized it. Not the object, the fear it could awaken. He tossed it toward a priest. Burn it. Dacian moved. He caught Varesh's wrist before the priest could obey. The sound of the commander's bones straining under the king's grip was soft, almost intimate. "Do not destroy evidence in front of me again," Dacian said. Varesh's face flushed with anger. "Evidence? You call enemy offerings evidence while 3 towers smoke behind us? You call staged ash prophecy." The word struck the courtyard like a thrown spear. Elaria's heart pounded. Varesh's eyes went cold. "Careful, Your Majesty. The houses already doubt your stomach for war. If you choose a cursed woman over the men holding your borders, you may keep neither." Dacian released him slowly. There it was again. The trap. Elaria saw it clearly now. If Dacian freed her, Varesh would call him bewitched. If he killed her, the northern wolves would carry the truth back into the forest, and war would come anyway. If he hesitated, both sides would smell weakness. The old wolf voice came again from beyond the gate. She was taken from the queen's arms beneath this wheel. Every eye turned toward the massive chain mechanism above Elaria's head. The Howling Gate's old wheel was half buried in frost and iron, its teeth black with age. Elaria had been found inside it as an infant. That was the story no one had ever allowed her to question. The wheel groaned. Not from wind, from memory. The silver sigil beneath her collarbone flared. The baby chains at her feet began to tremble. One by one, they lifted from the snow and turned toward the old chain wheel, tiny broken links pulling through the air as if drawn by an invisible hand. Varesh shouted, "Shoot the wolves!" Dacian's voice roared over his. "No one fires." The chains struck the gate wheel. A sound burst from the iron. Not metal, not magic, but a woman screaming. Elaria cried out as the sound tore through her mark. A vision flashed across the black bars. A queen in torn gray battle armor, bleeding and wild-eyed, running through smoke with a baby pressed to her chest. Valkaran soldiers surrounded her. Varesh stood among them, younger, his sword wet. Behind him, a royal banner snapped in the blood moon wind. The queen screamed, "Do not let them name her curse." The vision shattered. Elaria sagged against the chains, shaking. Dacian stared at Varesh. The commander's face had gone white. Then the scarred wolf outside the gate spoke one final sentence. "Ask your commander what he did with Queen Merel's daughter. Ask your commander what he did with Queen Merel's daughter." The word stayed in the cold, long after the old wolf's mouth closed. No one on the wall breathed freely. Elaria hung against the Howling Gate, wrists bleeding, mark burning beneath her collarbone, while the vision of the running queen still flickered behind her eyes. Queen Merel. The name felt impossible and familiar at once, like a song heard through stone. Dacian turned to Varesh. The commander looked older beneath the blood moon. Not weaker. More dangerous. A man whose lie had been wounded, but not killed. "Answer," Dacian said. Varesh's mouth tightened. "Enemy wolves speak enemy stories." The gate showed her. The gate is old iron soaked in war. It shows grief, not truth. The baby chains trembled at Elaria's feet. Dacian's eyes did not leave Varesh. "You were there. I was a soldier. You were in the vision. I was saving your father's victory." The answer came like a blade finally drawn. The courtyard went still. Varesh seemed to realize what he had admitted, but he did not retreat from it. Instead, he straightened under the weight of every stare. "Yes," he said. "I was there when Merel fell. I was there when the Northern Queen tried to smuggle her heir through this gate under cover of blood and smoke. And I was there when your father ordered that child taken." Elaria could not feel the cold anymore. Her body had gone strangely distant. Dacian's voice dropped. "Taken where?" Varesh looked at her then. "Hidden where no northern wolf could claim her. Raised under a curse instead of a crown. Alive because I advised mercy." The word mercy struck Elaria so hard she laughed. It came out broken. You call this alive? Varesh's gaze sharpened. You stood inside Valkyrin's walls for 20 years while your mother's pack died beyond them. Yes, that is alive. The wolves beyond the gate snarled. Hundreds of them rose halfway before the scarred elder wolf growled them back down. Even in rage, they obeyed. Dacian saw that. So did Varesh. The commander pointed through the bars. Look at them. They kneel now because it suits their theater. Open the gate, and they will tear through every child sleeping inside these walls. The soldiers shifted. Fear returned. It always returned faster than truth. Dacian's face hardened. You used moon black ash on her mark. Varesh did not deny it. The mark needed awakening. You staged proof. I forced the truth to show itself. You chained her to a wargate. I gave you a chance to see what she was. Before she poisoned the court from within, Elaria lifted her head. I poisoned nothing. Varesh turned on her. You were born poison. Your blood is a banner. Your breathing is a summons. Do you think the northern packs gathered tonight because they love you? They want what your body represents. Morel's line, the old moon claim. A reason to bleed this kingdom dry. The words should have frightened her. They did. But underneath fear, another feeling rose. Anger. Not wild. Not reckless. Deep. All her life they had told her she was dangerous, because of what she might call. Now she understood the danger was what others had buried inside her name. Dacian reached for the shackle at her wrist. Varesh snapped. If you free her, the houses will call it treason. Dacian's hand stopped inches from the silver. The hesitation hurt. Elaria hated that it hurt. She looked at him. Then do not free me, because you pity me. His gold eyes met hers. Why should I free you? Because if you leave me chained, you prove he still rules the war through your hands. The words struck him. Behind his eyes, something moved. Pride, fury, shame, all locked behind a king's control. Varesh leaned closer. Your Majesty, remember who dragged you from the northern field. Remember who bled beside you when Meryl's wolves cut down your father's line. I have never asked you to trust me blindly. No, Dacian said softly. You taught me to. Varesh went still. Dacian drew his dagger. The courtyard inhaled. He cut the shackle from Elaria's right wrist. Silver broke. Pain shot through her arm as blood returned. She nearly fell, but forced herself upright, refusing to let the first moment of freedom look like collapse. The wolves beyond the gate lowered their heads. Dacian cut the second shackle. When it fell, Elaria staggered. This time he caught her. His hand closed around her waist, strong and warm through the torn fabric of her dress. Every wolf on both sides of the gate saw it. Every noble saw the Alpha King, holding the woman they had chained as bait. Elaria stiffened. Dacian felt it, and released her slowly, though his body stayed near enough to catch her again. I am not claiming you, he said under his breath. Good, she whispered. His mouth tightened, almost as if the answer wounded, and relieved him at once. Varesh shouted to the wall. Behold, your king! The northern curse stands free inside our gate, and he touches her as if she were not the knife at his throat. The priests began murmuring. Dacian turned. Silence, but it was too late. One southern lord stepped forward on the battlement. If she is Morel's daughter, then the northern packs have a royal claim through her. Another said, if she is restored, old conquest law breaks. A third whispered, if the king protects her, he chooses their queen over our dead. The old trap widened. Elaria understood now why Varesh had chained her publicly. Her death would have been simple. Her survival made her political fire. The scarred wolf beyond the bars lowered its head and pushed one final object through the gate. A small silver key, blackened by age. Elaria stared at it. The key fit the infant shackle still lying among the baby chains. The old wolf spoke again. Her mother left one command with the gate. The Howling Gate groaned. The chain wheel above Elaria began to turn by itself. Iron teeth, frozen for 20 years, moved under moonlight. The black gate shuddered. Ancient wolf runes woke along the bars, not Valkyrin's conquest marks, but older symbols beneath them. Silver light spread across the iron like veins. Dacian stepped back, stunned. Varesh's face twisted with fear. "No," he said. Elaria's mark burned silver. A woman's voice rose from the turning wheel, cracked by time but unmistakably royal. "If my daughter returns to the gate alive, let the stolen moon choose where it belongs." The outer bars opened, not toward the enemy forest, toward Elaria. And every kneeling wolf beyond the gate began to howl her true name. The wolves howled a name Elaria had never heard and somehow knew. Elarin. It rolled through the blood moon night like a buried crown striking stone. Not Elaria, not Moonless, not Curse. Elarin. The sound entered her bones before it entered her ears, waking places in her that had been made numb by years of names meant to wound. Beyond the gate, hundreds of northern wolves lowered their heads. Inside the courtyard, Valkyran soldiers stepped back. Dacian stood between both armies, his dagger still in hand, staring at the gate as it opened inward toward her. The black iron bars did not move for any soldier. They did not answer Varesh, or the priests, or the old conquest runes carved over them. They answered Elaria. "No, Elarin." The silver key at her feet trembled. Varesh moved first. He lunged for it with the speed of a man who had survived wars by killing truth before it fully stood. Elaria saw the flash of his hand, the commander's ring, the knife hidden beneath his sleeve. Dacian caught him by the wrist. The two men froze inches from the key. "Do not," Dacian said. Varesh's face twisted. "You have no idea what that key opens. Then I will learn, before I let you bury it." Varesh laughed, harsh and low. "You think you are saving a woman. You are opening a claim that will split your kingdom in half." Elaria bent slowly and picked up the key. The moment the blackened silver touched her palm, the baby chains at her feet lifted into the air. Each broken shackle turned toward her, trembling like small lost things, finding the hand that should have held them. The oldest chain, the one marked with Valkyrin's royal seal, opened by itself. Inside the ring was an inscription, not carved, bitten into the silver by tiny teeth. Elarin Merilith, daughter of the Moongate Queen. The courtyard went silent. A priest made a strangled sound. That line was erased. The scarred elder wolf beyond the bars raised its head. Not erased. Stolen. Ilaria's breath shook. Daughter. Queen. Stolen. The words were too large for a body that had spent its life shrinking to survive. She looked at Dacian because some foolish part of her still wanted him to deny it gently, to make the world smaller again, to say this was another trick. He did not. His face had gone pale beneath the blood moon. "My father," he said slowly, "told me Morel died childless." Varesh tore his wrist from Dacian's grip. "Because she should have." The answer struck harder than confession. Every wolf beyond the gate snarled. Dacian turned on him. Varesh no longer looked afraid. He had passed fear and reached the place where men reveal the ugliness they once called duty. "Do you know what Morel's child meant?" Varesh demanded. "A living moon pack heir inside Valkyrin's walls. A bridge between conquered blood and the throne. Your father wanted leverage. I wanted survival. So yes, we hid her. We named her Curse. We kept her close enough to watch and low enough to dismiss." Elaria felt the ground tilt. All those years of pity, disgust, locked doors, priests touching her mark with silver tongs, none of it had been superstition. It had been management. Dacian's voice was deadly. "You let her be beaten as an omen. You let her live. She was a child. So were you when Morel's wolves cut through our eastern battalion." The words hit Dacian, where Varesh knew they would. Elaria saw the old wound open in his eyes. The battlefield, the saved boy, the commander carrying him home. Varesh had not only raised an army around Dacian, he had raised a debt inside him. The chain wheel groaned again. Queen Morelle's voice returned through the gate. Blood remembers what conquest renames. The silver key burned in Elaria's palm. She saw a vision not fully, not clearly, but enough. A woman with storm-gray hair and a crown of moonbone running toward the Howling Gate with a baby against her chest. Valcaran soldiers closing in. Varesh younger, blade drawn. Another man in a royal cloak shouting, "The child lives, or the North never kneels." Then baby Elaria crying inside the chainwheel, while her mother's hands were dragged away from her. Elaria staggered. Dacian caught her elbow, but she pulled free before leaning into him could become easier than standing. "No," she whispered. Not at him. At all of it. The northern wolves began pushing the baby chains through the gate. Not one or two now. Dozens. Hundreds. Each one carried a name tag. A birth ribbon. A broken infant shackle from children taken after conquest and renamed inside Valcaran. Elaria looked at them in horror. "There were others." The elder wolf's voice broke. "You were the only one we found breathing." A soft sound escaped her. The silver key rose from her palm and turned in the air. It flew to the Howling Gate's central lock. Varesh shouted, "Stop it!" The key entered. The gate opened fully. Not with a scream of war, with a lullaby. An old northern song spilled from the iron, sung by a queen who had hidden her last command inside the mechanism that stole her child. The wolves beyond the gate did not charge. They parted. At the center of the forest path stood a white wolf with a torn moonbone crown hanging from its neck. It carried no weapon, only a folded gray battle banner, the same cloth Elaria had been wrapped in as an infant. The white wolf laid it at her feet and bowed so low its muzzle touched her blood on the stone. Dacian stared at the banner. Then he looked at Elaria. Something in his expression shifted suspicion breaking beneath shame, fear sharpened by recognition. Varesh saw it and pulled his sword. "If you will not protect the kingdom from her," he said, "I will." He struck toward Elaria's back. Dacian moved between them. The blade meant for her sank into the Alpha King's side. The courtyard erupted. Elaria screamed without sound. Dacian gripped Varesh's wrist, blood spilling over black armor, and snarled through his teeth. "Now I know which wolf summoned war." The blood from his wound fell onto the gray battle banner. The cloth ignited silver, and beneath Elaria's collarbone, the moonpack sigil opened like a living eye. The moonpack sigil opened beneath Elaria's skin, not like a wound, like an eye that had been forced shut for 20 years and had finally remembered how to see. Silver light burst from the mark under her collarbone, spilling across her torn dress, over the gray battle banner at her feet, and into the snow-dark stones of the Howling Gate. Every broken baby chain lifted into the air, every torn birth ribbon trembled. Every northern wolf lowered its head so deeply that even the soldiers on Valcaran's wall understood this was not an invasion ritual. It was morning. Dacian staggered, but did not fall. Varesh's sword remained buried in his side. The Alpha King gripped the commander's wrist with one hand and the blade with the other, keeping it from tearing deeper. Blood ran down his armor, black in the moonlight, then silver where it touched the awakened banner. Elaria lunged toward him. Dacian's eyes cut to hers. "Stay back." His voice was rough with pain, but the command was not for control. It was fear. Varesh smiled through clenched teeth. "Listen to him, moon-cursed girl. Your king knows what happens when your blood touches his." The sigil burned hotter. Elaria stopped, only because the gray banner beneath her feet moved. The old cloth unfolded by itself, spreading across the stones until the torn wolf crest became visible. A white wolf crowned by a crescent moon, its throat bound in broken chain. The northern wolves howled. Elaria saw then that the banner was not merely cloth. It was a burial record. Names began appearing across it in silver thread. Infant names. Dozens. Children taken during the conquest. Children renamed. Children who had died before anyone came for them. Each name burned briefly, then settled into the fabric like a star stitched into night. At the center, one name glowed brightest. Elarin Merilith. Under it, another line appeared. Bound to Valkyrian blood by stolen oath. Dacian stared at the words. The pain in his face changed. Not from the wound, from understanding. "My bloodline," he whispered. Varesh ripped the sword free. Dacian dropped to one knee. The courtyard exploded into shouts. Elaria moved before anyone could stop her. She reached him as he hit the stone, catching his shoulder with both hands. His blood soaked her fingers. His heat burned through his armor, too fierce, too alive, too close. For one breath, all the wolves vanished. The gate vanished. The court, the moon, Varesh, the war, all of it narrowed to Dacian's face as he looked up at her, jaw clenched against agony, gold eyes furious that she had come near danger. "You never obey," he rasped. "You never ask correctly." A broken laugh nearly escaped him, but pain swallowed it. Then the sigil's light touched his blood. The reaction was immediate. Silver fire raced from Elaria's mark through Dacian's wound. He arched with a strangled growl, claws bursting from one hand as his wolf surged too close to the surface. Soldiers raised weapons. Northern wolves rose with snarls. Elaria pressed harder against the wound, terrified. "What is happening?" The elder wolf beyond the gate answered. The stolen oath recognizes both halves. Varesh backed away, sword red to the hilt. "Do you see? She binds him already. Kill her before the gate makes him kneel." Dacian's wolf growled through his teeth, but his hand closed over Elaria's wrist. Not to push her away, to hold her there. "No one touches her," he said. The words came out layered with wolf. The courtyard froze. Elaria felt the power of that command move through every Valkyrian soldier. Some flinched. Some bowed their heads by instinct. But the northern wolves did something stranger. They answered. One by one they pressed their muzzles to the ground. Not before Dacian, before both of them. The silver fire between Elaria's hand and Dacian's wound flared, and a new vision rose from the banner. The old king of Valkyrin stood before the Howling Gate, with baby Elaria in his arms. Queen Morel was on her knees, bound and bleeding, still reaching for her child. Beside the king stood Varesh, younger and expressionless. "She lives," Morel begged. "Let her at least keep her name." The old king looked at the baby's crescent mark. "Her name is a road home. Burn it." Varesh lifted a bowl of moon-black ash. Elaria felt her own skin remember. The ash was smeared over the infant mark, turning silver to black. Merala screamed. The vision shifted. Varesh leaned over the baby shackle and pressed Valkyrin's royal seal into it. "If the North comes for her, the gate will call it war. If she cries for them, we will call it curse." The vision broke. Silence followed. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. Dacian looked at Varesh with a hatred so cold it seemed beyond rage. "You made her existence a weapon." Varesh lifted his sword again. "I made your father's conquest hold. You made a child pay for it. I made peace." Elaria rose slowly from beside Dacian. Her hands were still wet with his blood. The moon-pack sigil blazed beneath her collarbone, but her voice was quiet when she spoke. "No, you made a prison and named it peace." The Howling Gate answered her. Its iron bars glowed silver from root to crown. The old conquest marks carved by Valkyrin peeled away like burnt bark, revealing moon-pack runes underneath. Every baby chain in the air spun faster, then flew toward Varesh. He slashed at them. Too late. Tiny broken shackles wrapped around his wrists, his throat, his sword arm. They did not cut into flesh. They tightened around memory, around every order he had given, every child he had hidden, every name he had buried beneath curse law. Varesh staggered. His face finally showed fear. The elder wolf stepped through the gate. No soldier fired. The wolf came to Elaria and lowered its head, placing its scarred brow beneath her bloodied hand. "My queen's child," it said. "Command us." The words shook her. Comment. All her life, others had commanded her body, her name, her silence, her death. Now an army knelt in the snow waiting for her word. Elaria looked at Dacian, still bleeding but standing now with effort, one hand pressed to his side. His gaze held hers, not demanding, not doubting, only waiting. Varesh choked against the baby chains. If she commands them, war begins. Elaria looked beyond the gate at the northern wolves, then back at Valkyran soldiers, frightened boys and weary men who had been fed lies until fear felt like loyalty. She lifted her chin. "No," she said. "War began when you stole children and called them omens." The baby chains flashed. The Howling Gate opened wider. Not for an army to enter, for the truth to pass through. And from the forest beyond, the ghost of Queen Merelle stepped into the blood moonlight. Queen Merelle did not walk like a ghost. She walked like a memory that had refused to rot. Silver light gathered around her as she stepped from the enemy forest into the open mouth of the Howling Gate. Her armor was torn at the chest. Her storm-gray hair hung loose over one shoulder. A crown of moonbone rested broken above her brow, and the edges of her body flickered like mist caught between worlds. Yet every northern wolf bowed lower when she passed. Elaria could not move. The woman from the vision. The queen in the torn battle banner. The mother who had screamed while Valkyran hands carried her child away. Merle stopped before her. For a moment, the battlefield, the gate, the soldiers, Varesh, even Dacian seemed to fade into the blood moon behind them. "My little moon," the queen whispered. Elaria's breath broke. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not as curse, not as omen, not as a problem waiting for death. The words entered her with unbearable tenderness, and for one dangerous second, she wanted to collapse into them like a child finally allowed to be tired. But she was not a child, and her mother was dead. "You left me here," Elaria said. The words came out rawer than she meant them to. A shadow of pain crossed Morelle's face. "No. They tore you from my arms. I left my command in the gate because I could not leave my body beside you." The baby chains around Varesh tightened. He choked, but forced out a laugh. A dead queen's grief is not law. Merelle turned. The blood moon sharpened behind her. "No," she said. "But stolen children are." The Howling Gate thundered once. Every chain wheel along the wall began to turn. Not just the ancient one above Elaria. All of them. Iron teeth groaned across the battlements, as if the fortress itself were remembering what it had been built to hide. Silver images rose along the gate. Infants taken in the conquest. Mothers marked dead while still breathing. Northern children renamed under Valkyran roofs. Small wrists locked in royal shackles so their bloodlines could never answer the moon. The Valkyran soldiers stared in horror. Some looked away. Dacian did not. His blood still ran down his side, but he stood upright, taking each vision like a blow he refused to dodge. Merelle looked at him. "Your father stole my daughter to break the north. Your commander kept her cursed to keep the lie useful. And you, son of the conqueror, what will you do now that the gate has opened?" The question struck the courtyard harder than any blade. Every wolf waited, northern and Valkyran alike. Dacian's Gaza moved to Elaria. "Not to Merelle, not to Varesh, to her. I will not decide over her head." A ripple passed through both sides. Elaria looked at him, startled. Varesh snarled through the baby chains. "Weakness." Dacian did not look away from Elaria. "No." At last, honesty. The word settled between them. Elaria felt its weight. All her life, men had discussed what she was. Curse, weapon, mercy, proof. Now the Alpha King was refusing to make another law out of her body, without her consent. It should have made the choice easier. It did not, because beyond the gate stood the wolves of her mother's blood, kneeling for a queen's child. Behind her stood the kingdom that had chained her, feared her, hurt her, and yet contained every familiar stone of her life. And beside her stood the king whose bloodline had stolen her, but whose hand had cut her free. The silver sigil beneath her collarbone pulsed. Mayorella stepped closer. "Come home, Elaria." The northern wolves lifted their heads. The word home trembled through them like hunger. Elaria's eyes burned. "I do not know where that is." Morel's face softened with grief. "Then choose where truth begins." Before Elaria could answer, Varesh twisted violently inside the baby chains. Blood ran from his throat where the tiny links tightened, but he smiled. "You still think this ends with confession?" His right hand opened. A black horn fell from his sleeve and struck the stone. Dacian's eyes widened. "No." Varesh crushed the horn beneath his boot. The sound that came from it was not loud. It was wrong. A deep war call rolled under the snow, under the wall, under the wolves' paws, from the southern watchtowers. Answering horns rose at once. Not Valkyran horns. Mercenary horns. Elaria turned toward the battlements. Far behind the courtyard, beyond the inner road, torches ignited in the dark. Varesh laughed, breathless. "If the king would not choose war, I chose it for him." The northern wolves surged to their feet. Valkyran soldiers raised bows again, confused and terrified. Dacian swore and gripped his wound. Meryl's ghost looked toward the southern hills. He called the oathless packs. Varesh's smile widened. "Men who care nothing for stolen children. Men paid to kill anything that crosses the gate." The first flaming arrows rose from the southern darkness and fell toward the courtyard. Dacian moved toward Elaria. The elder wolf lunged to shield Meryl's banner. Elaria stood between two armies, her mother's ghost at her back, the Alpha King bleeding at her side, and baby chains spinning like silver stars around Varesh. The Howling Gate opened wider. Not inward now, upward. Its iron teeth split apart, revealing an ancient moon bell hidden inside the chain wheel. Morel's voice cut through the chaos. "Ring it, daughter." Elaria stared at the bell. Varesh's face twisted in terror. "Do not touch that." The first arrow struck the stone beside her and burst into black flame. Elaria reached for the moonbell chain, and every wolf in the courtyard began to howl. The moonbell chain was colder than the shackles had been. The moment Elaria's fingers closed around it, every sound in the courtyard bent toward her. The battle horns from the southern hills, the panic of Valkyran soldiers, the snarls of northern wolves, the crackle of black fire spreading where the mercenary arrows struck stone. All of it narrowed into one thin silver note waiting inside the hidden bell. Varesh thrashed against the baby chains. "If she rings it, she claims the gate." Dacian turned sharply. "What does that mean?" Varesh smiled through blood. "Ask her dead mother." Queen Meryl's ghost stood beyond Elaria, pale beneath the blood moon. The Howling Gate was not built by Valkyran. It was stolen from the Moon Pack after conquest. Its bell does not summon war. It summons witness. Another black arrow struck the wall above them. Soldiers screamed as fire spread along the battlement. Dacian moved closer to Elaria despite the blood soaking his side. "What will it cost her?" Morel's eyes softened. "A gate only answers a living heir. That is not an answer. It will open every hidden passage where stolen children were carried." Varesh laughed. "And invite every army waiting in the dark." Elaria looked up at the bell chain. All her life, other people had told her what her blood meant. Curse. Omen. Bait. War. Now even truth came with teeth. If she rang the bell, hidden passages would open. Northern wolves might enter. Mercenaries might pour through the south. Valkyran could fracture before dawn. But if she did nothing, Varesh would turn the chaos into proof that she should have died chained. Dacian's hand closed over the chain above hers. Elaria looked at him. His face was pale with pain, but his eyes were steady. Not alone. The words were not a claim. They were not forgiveness. They were a choice made where everyone could see. Varesh snarled. Your bloodline stole her. Do you think touching the bell beside her cleans that? Dacian's gaze remained on Elaria. No. The honesty startled her. It does not clean anything, he said. But if my blood helped lock the gate, then my hand can help bear what opens. Elaria's throat tightened. Behind them, the first mercenaries appeared on the southern road. Oathless wolves in black hides, hired blades carrying hooked spears and fire bows. They had come not to defend Valkeren, but to make sure no truth survived the night. Elaria pulled the chain. The moon bell rang. The sound was not loud. It was endless. Silver light burst through the Howling Gate and raced beneath the snow, under the walls, through the old roads and buried tunnels of Valkeren. Every conquest rune on the fortress cracked. Every hidden lock, marked with moonpack blood, opened. From beneath the courtyard rose the echoes of crying infants, running mothers, iron wheels, and orders spoken in royal voices. The battlefield froze. Then doors began to open inside the wall. Small doors, child-sized doors. Stone panels slid apart along the base of the fortress, revealing narrow passages lined with old claw marks. Inside each tunnel lay evidence no court could burn quickly enough. Strips of gray banner, broken cradle tags, infant chains, tiny bones wrapped in wolf fur, and namestones scraped almost clean. Valkyren soldiers stared in horror. Some dropped their bows. One older guard fell to his knees, whispering, "My mother said there were tunnels." Varesh's face twisted. Lies dug by enemies. The baby chains around his throat tightened. The moon bell rang again without Elaria pulling it. A vision rose above the gate. Not one memory. Many. Northern infants carried through secret tunnels into Valkyren households. Moonpack mothers executed as raiders. Priests painting black ash over silver birthmarks. Commanders writing curse law so stolen children could never inherit names. Varesh appeared in every decade of the vision. Younger than older. Always present. Always calling survival by another name. The mercenary captain on the southern road shouted, "Burn the gate!" His men loosed black fire arrows. Dacian stepped in front of Elaria. So did the elder northern wolf. So did 3 Valkeren soldiers who had lowered their bows. The arrows struck their shields and burst into smoke. For the first time that night, both sides stood on the same line. Elaria felt the bell's note humming through her bones. Morel's ghost whispered, "Now, command the gate." Elaria looked at the northern wolves. They waited. She looked at Valkeren's soldiers. Some still feared her, but others stared at the tunnels with faces stripped of certainty. She looked at Dacian, bleeding and unbowed beside her. Then she looked at Varesh. He had wanted her to command war, so she did not. "Close the southern road," Elaria said. The Howling Gate answered. Its iron roots tore through the ground, racing not toward the northern forest, but toward the mercenaries behind Valkeren. Black bars erupted from the snow, forming a second gate across the southern road. The oathless packs crashed against it with snarls and sparks. Elaria lifted her voice. "Open the child tunnels." The hidden passages widened. Not for armies. For witnesses. Freed servants, old nurses, buried record keepers, and gray-haired survivors began emerging from the tunnels, each carrying fragments of stolen names. Some were Valkeren-born, some northern. Some had lived so long under false houses, they no longer knew which side should claim them. They came anyway. Truth crossed the courtyard before any army did. Varesh stared as his war dissolved into witness. Dacian looked at Elaria with something fierce and shaken in his eyes. "You could have opened the gate for the north. I know. You trapped the mercenaries instead. They were the only ones here who came only to kill." His mouth tightened, almost a smile. almost grief. You chose better than most kings. Ilaria's answer caught in her chest. Before she could speak, the moonbell cracked. A dark line split through its silver side. Morel's ghost turned sharply. Varesh began to laugh. The bell was never meant to ring for a stolen heir raised under enemy blood, he said. It will demand one final proof. The cracked bell poured silver light down over Elaria and Dacian. The baby chains at Varesh's throat unfastened and flew toward them, circling like a crown of broken infant's grief. Queen Meryl's face filled with sorrow. To restore the stolen line, she whispered, the gate must know whether she belongs to the mother who lost her, or the king who freed her. The chains tightened into a circle between Elaria and Dacian, and the moonbell asked for blood. The moonbell asked for blood. Not much. That was what made it cruel. A kingdom could call for rivers, and men would understand war. A gate could demand a life, and the world would understand sacrifice. But the bell asked for a single drop, small enough to seem merciful, old enough to decide where Elaria's name would belong. The broken baby chains circled between her and Dacian, each tiny link glowing silver beneath the blood moon. The chain, marked with Valkyrin's royal seal, turned toward him. The melted shackle from her infant wrist turned toward her. Between them, the gray battle banner lifted from the stones and spread itself like an open wound. Queen Morel's ghost stood beyond the gate, sorrow in her pale eyes. The gate must know, she whispered. Elaria looked at her. Know what? Whether the stolen child returns only to the mother who lost her, or whether the king who freed her can stand beside the truth his bloodline stole. Varesh laughed from where the baby chains had left, him bruised and bleeding. There it is. The dead queen wants your king bound to the north, one drop, and Valkyrin calls it surrender. Dacian's jaw tightened. Blood still darkened his side where Varesh's blade had gone in, but he did not look away from Elaria. What happens if I give blood? He asked Morel. The ghost queen's face remained still. The gate will judge whether your blood carries theft or repentance, and if it judges theft, the chains will remember. The Valkyrin soldiers shifted uneasily. Dacian looked at the circling infant shackles. So did Elaria. They were small. Too small. The sight of them made her chest hurt worse than the silver burns on her wrists. She imagined babies crying in hidden tunnels, mothers running through smoke, names scraped from tags before they were old enough to answer. She did not want Dacian chained for what his father had done. She also did not want the gate to pretend blood carried no cost. Dacian stepped closer to the floating circle. Elaria caught his arm. You do not have to prove yourself to my mother's ghost. His eyes lowered to hers. No, he said. I have to prove myself to you. That struck too deep. For one breath, she forgot the wall, the wolves, the mercenaries trapped on the southern road. She saw only the man who had watched her bleed, cut her free, taken a blade meant for her, and still carried the face of the kingdom that stole her. I do not know what I want from you, she whispered. Then I will not ask you to decide tonight. He drew his dagger. Varesh snarled. Your Majesty. Think. Dacian cut his palm. I am. His blood fell onto the gray battle banner. The moon bell rang once. The sound shook the snow from the black pines. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the baby chains flew at Dacian. Elaria screamed, but they did not bind his throat. They wrapped around his wounded side, over the place Varesh had struck him, and burned silver against his armor. Dacian dropped to one knee with a growl, claws bursting from his hands as the gate forced memory through him. The courtyard filled with vision. The old king of Valkyrin stood in the throne hall 20 years before, holding Morel's stolen child while generals argued around him. Varesh stepped forward, young and cold. Keep the child, Varesh said. Raise her cursed. If the north rises, we show them their lost moon living under our mercy. The old king frowned. And if my son asks, Varesh's eyes moved toward a boy standing in the doorway. Young Dacian. too small for armor, old enough to understand fear. Teach him. She is the reason the wolves come, Varesh said. A king who fears the curse will never follow it home. The vision shifted. Young Dacian in a sickbed after the northern battlefield. Varesh beside him, whispering while healers changed bloody cloth. The north took your father's peace. The cursed child calls them. If you are merciful, they will come for your throat. Dacian's adult body shook under the baby chains. Elaria understood. Varesh had not only lied to the kingdom, he had fed Dacian fear until her existence became a wound inside him. The vision broke. Dacian remained on one knee, breathing hard, but the chains did not tighten further. Slowly, one by one, they unlocked from his armor and dropped at his feet. The moon bell rang again. Queen Morel looked at him. "Repentance is not innocence," she said. Dacian lifted his head. "I know. Will you return what was stolen?" He looked at Elaria. "Not the ghost. If she wants it returned." Meril's eyes softened. Varesh's face twisted. "You fool! You have just made her claim stronger than your crown." Dacian stood with effort. "No," he said. "I made my crown answerable to what it stole." The words moved through the courtyard like fire under ice. The northern wolves lowered their heads. Some Valkyran soldiers did too. Elaria felt the moon pack's sigil pulse beneath her collarbone. This time it did not burn. It opened, spreading silver light down her arms, over the scars from the shackles, into the blood on Dacian's palm. The gate was not done. The moon bell turned toward her. Her blood. Elaria looked at her mother. "If I give it, do I belong to the north?" Morel's ghost stepped closer. "You already belong to yourself. Blood only tells the gate which name it must restore." Elaria swallowed hard. Then she cut her palm on the edge of the silver key. Her blood fell beside Dacian's on the gray battle banner. The Howling Gate opened its memory. Not a vision of war this time. A cradle. Moonbone carved with wolves. A queen bending over her daughter, pressing a kiss to a tiny crescent mark. "Alarin Merileth," the queen whispered. "If the world steals your name, let the gate keep it until you come home breathing." The cradle faded. The banner blazed. The baby chains lifted one final time and flew apart, scattering across the snow as harmless silver sparks. The black ash smeared over Elaria's mark burned away. The curse law carved into the gate, cracked from top to bottom. Above them, the moon bell spoke in Morel's voice, and Elaria's at once. "The stolen child is restored." The northern wolves howled. Valkyran did not answer at first. Then the wounded white pup from the lower stables broke free from a handler and limped across the courtyard toward Elaria. It pressed its small head against her knee. A few soldiers lowered their bows. Then more. Dacian looked at the pup, then at Elaria. For the first time, his face showed something too fragile to be called hope. Varesh saw the shift and lunged for a fallen horn. Elaria turned before he reached it. The Howling Gate answered her anger. Iron roots burst from the stone and wrapped around Varesh's legs, dragging him down before he could call another war. He struck the ground hard, but still spat blood, and laughed. "You think a name ends conquest?" Elaria stepped toward him. "No," she said, "but it ends yours." The gate roots tightened. Varesh was pulled upright against the black bars, bound where she had been bound, his wrists locked in iron rings beneath the blood moon. The courtyard went silent. Elaria looked at Dacian. This time, he did not speak for her. He waited. Varesh lifted his chin, hatred burning in his eyes. "Kill me then, Moon Queen." The title chilled her. Queen. Not yet, maybe never. Not because he said it. Elaria looked at the baby chains melted into sparks, the soldiers who had believed lies, the wolves who had come to rescue rather than attack, and the Alpha King bleeding beside the truth. "No," she said. "Death is too clean for men who used children as chains." The Howling Gate groaned. Its bars closed around Varesh, not crushing him, but sealing him inside the old chain wheel. Elaria raised her voice so both armies could hear. He will live to name every stolen child. Varesh's smile vanished. And every time he lies, she said, the gate will howl louder. The first howl came at once, from the iron, from the wolves, from the dead names waking beneath the snow. The gate howled with Varesh inside it. Not a wolf's howl. Not fully. It was iron learning pain. Old chains remembering small wrists. Conquest marks screaming as moonpack runes burned beneath them. Varesh hung trapped in the chain wheel, where Elaria had once been found as an infant, wrists locked to the same black iron teeth that had hidden her first cries from the world. Every time he tried to speak, the gate answered. He opened his mouth to curse her. The iron howled. He tried to call the northern wolves invaders. The baby chains, now scattered as silver sparks across the snow, flared so brightly he choked on the lie. Elaria stood before him with blood on both palms, Dacian's blood drying beneath her fingers, and the restored sigil beneath her collarbone still glowing through torn fabric. The white pup leaned against her leg, trembling but unafraid. Beyond the gate, the northern wolves waited in silence. Behind her, Valkyran soldiers watched the commander they had trusted become a prisoner of the truth he had buried. Dacian stepped beside her, one hand pressed to his wounded side. "You should sit," Elaria said without looking at him. "I have survived worse." She turned her head. "That does not make bleeding noble." A faint, pained breath left him. Almost a laugh, almost not. "No one has ever corrected my war posture during a treason crisis. Then your court has been failing you for years." His eyes held hers for one dangerous heartbeat. There should not have been warmth in a moment like this. Not with blood on the snow and war still waiting beyond the southern gate. But something passed between them anyway. Sharp, fragile, unwanted by every law that had made them enemies. Then Marilee's ghost spoke. "The stolen line is restored, but not yet safe." The northern wolves lifted their heads. Elaria's chest tightened. What else? Morel looked past the gate, toward the southern road where mercenary packs still clawed at the iron roots Elaria had raised. Varesh did not call them only to kill you. He called them to burn the records before dawn. Dacian's expression hardened. "What records?" The ghost queen turned toward the fortress behind them. "The Hall of Names." The words moved through Valkyran like a cold blade. Several older soldiers lowered their eyes too quickly. Elaria saw. So did Dacian. He turned to one of his captains. "Where is it?" The man swallowed. "Beneath the Eastern Archive, Your Majesty." Dacian's voice became very quiet. "And why have I never been told of a Hall of Names beneath my own fortress?" No one answered. From inside the chain wheel, Varesh laughed until the gate howled him silent. Elaria understood before anyone explained. "It holds the stolen children." Morel nodded. "Not their bodies. Their renamed lives. Which Valkyran house took them? Which priest blackened their marks? Which commanders signed them into false bloodlines?" Dacian looked toward the fortress doors. If those records burned, the truth would survive only as accusation. Northern grief against Valkyran denial. Enough to start war all over again. He drew himself upright despite the wound. "We go now." Elaria stepped with him. Dacian stopped. "You have lost blood. So have you. This is my fortress, and my stolen name." He did not argue again. That was the first thing she liked about him, and hated herself for noticing. They crossed the courtyard together, followed by the elder northern wolf, the white pup, a handful of Valkyran soldiers who had lowered their bows, and Morel's fading ghost. The rest stayed to guard the gate and hold the mercenaries behind the iron roots. As they entered the Eastern Archive, smoke met them. Not thick yet, but deliberata. Someone had already reached the records. Dacian cursed and shoved the doors open. The archive chamber beyond was filled with overturned shelves and burning parchment. 3 priests in ash-gray robes stood around a stairwell, throwing scrolls into a brazier fed by black flame. When they saw Dacian, they froze. One whispered, "Commander's order." Dacian's voice cut like winter. "Your king stands before you." The priests dropped to their knees. Elaria did not look at them long. Her sigil was pulling her toward the stairwell. Down. She moved before anyone gave permission. Below the archive lay a circular chamber carved entirely from moonstone. Thousands of name slates lined the walls. Some were intact. Others had been scraped, blackened, or painted over with Valkyrian crests. In the center of the room stood a stone cradle filled with ash. Elaria stopped at the threshold. The air left her body. Dacian came beside her and went still. Names were everywhere. Not dozens. Hundreds. Children taken after conquest. Infants adopted into loyal houses. Northern heirs renamed as servants, wards, hostages, bastards, war orphans, curses. Elaria touched the nearest slate. The black paint over it cracked beneath her fingers. A name appeared. Sorin Mile. Taken at 6 months. Renamed Corin Veilguard. Died at 12 in border service. Another slate lit beside it. Then another. The Hall of Names began waking. Morel's ghost pressed a hand to her mouth, grief passing through her like moonlight through mist. The elder wolf lowered itself to the floor. Dacian stared at the wall of stolen lives. "My father knew." Elaria's voice came softly. "Your court knew." He closed his eyes once. When he opened them, the king in him looked older. "We restore all of them." A priest behind them whispered, "Your Majesty, some of those names are tied to living houses. Restoring them will break inheritances, marriages, military oaths." Dacian turned. The priest went silent. "Good," the Alpha King said. Elaria looked at him then, not with forgiveness, not yet, but with something like recognition. Before either could speak, black fire erupted from the stone cradle. The ash inside it rose in the shape of Varesh's face. His voice crawled through the room. "If the names wake, the old conquest oath dies. If the oath dies, every northern wolf can cross Valkyrian soil by blood right." The chamber shook. Above them, the Howling Gate rang. Varesh's ash mouth smiled. "So choose, Alpha King. Burn the stolen names and keep your borders, or restore her people and watch your kingdom call you traitor." Dacian looked at the burning cradle, then at Elaria. This time, there was no hesitation. He took his dagger and cut his palm again. "Then let my kingdom hear why." He pressed his blood to the stone cradle. Elaria placed her marked hand beside his. The Hall of Names exploded with silver light, and every stolen child began to speak. Every stolen child began to speak. Not all at once. That would have been easier. They came one by one, voices rising from the moonstone walls, from scraped name slates, from burned adoption records, from blackened cradle tags hidden beneath Valkyrian crests. Some voices were too young to form words. Some were old now, roughened by lives spent under false names. Some had died long before this night, and spoke only as echoes held in stone. Sorin Mile, Lioraven, Kale of Moonridge, Thessa Greyborn. Name after name filled the Hall of Names, until the chamber trembled with all the lives conquest had swallowed and renamed as mercy. Elaria stood, with her marked hand pressed beside Dacian's bloodied palm on the stone cradle. Silver light ran through her veins, through his blood, through the gray battle banner still tied around her shoulders, like a wound made visible. She felt every stolen name strike her bones. Not as power, as weight. Dacian did not pull away. His face was pale from blood loss, but he kept his hand on the cradle, as the truth entered him too. With each name, his jaw tightened. With each stolen child, another piece of his father's victory became something uglier. Above the cradle, Varesh's ash mouth twisted. "Enough," it hissed. "These names will tear your kingdom open." Dacian looked at him. "No." They show where it was already torn. The Hall of Names answered. Silver light burst from the walls and raced upward through the archive, through the fortress stones, through the Howling Gate itself. Every awakened name flew into the night as a line of moonfire, appearing above the battlements where both armies could see. The sky filled with stolen children. Valkyrian soldiers staggered back, reading names they recognized as comrades, servants, spouses, stable hands, healers, guards. Northern wolves lifted their muzzles and howled for cousins and siblings they had mourned as dead. The old lie cracked not because one side accused the other, but because both sides saw themselves inside it. A Valkyrian captain dropped his sword. "My mother," he whispered, staring at a name burning above the gate. "She was Northern?" The elder wolf bowed its scarred head. "She was Maelthorn, taken at 2 winters." The captain covered his mouth, grief and horror breaking through every lesson he had been fed. More soldiers lowered weapons. Not all. Some clung to anger because anger gave them a simpler world. Some nobles shouted that the names were witchcraft. Some priests screamed that restoring stolen blood would collapse inheritance law. Elaria heard all of it from the hall below. Her knees shook. The stone cradle pulsed beneath her palm. Varesh's ash voice sharpened. "Listen to them. They will never accept her. Let the names burn out. Let the North take its wolves and go. You can still rule if you stop this now." Dacian's eyes lifted to Elaria. For one terrible moment, she saw the cost. If he restored the names, his own throne might weaken. Houses would revolt. Conquest laws would shatter. Borders drawn in blood would become questions. Every comfortable lie in Valkyrin would demand payment. He could still choose power. He could still choose silence. Instead, Dacian took his crown from his head. The silver clawband looked cold in his bloodied hand. Elaria stared at him. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done before anyone chained you to a gate." He set the crown on the stone cradle. The Hall of Names went silent. Dacian's voice carried upward through the moonfire names, through the gate, through both armies. "I, Dacian Vale, Alpha King of Valkyrin, place my crown under witness of every stolen child. My throne will not stand above erased blood. If conquest law must break for these names to live, then let it break." The courtyard above erupted. Varesh screamed from the chainwheel. The nobles shouted treason. The northern wolves howled so fiercely snow fell from the black pines. Elaria could not speak. Dacian turned to her. There was no demand in his face. No expectation of gratitude. No claim hidden behind sacrifice. Only a wounded king placing his power where his bloodline had placed chains. "The North may take you home if you choose," he said quietly. "Valkyrin may answer for what it did without owning what comes after. I will not use justice to keep you." Something inside her ached. It would have been easier if he were cruel. Easier if every choice were clean. But Dacian stood before her, bleeding from the blade meant for her, crown surrendered to the names, still carrying the face of the kingdom that stole her. Elaria looked at the crown, then at the names burning above, then at the memory of Queen Morel. Watching from the gate through silver mist, her mother did not command. That mattered. For the first time, no one did. Elaria lifted her hand from the cradle and picked up the gray battle banner. Its torn cloth wrapped around her fingers. Warm now, no longer a burial rag, but a lineage returned. "I will not be taken again," she said. The hall listened. Not by the North, not by Valkyrin, not by grief, not by guilt. Dacian bowed his head once. "Then what do you choose?" Elaria looked toward the stairs leading back to the gate. "I choose the names first." The stone cradle opened. Inside lay one final shackle. Not small, not made for an infant. A queen's chain, blackened by old moonfire, engraved with Morel's name, and sealed with Valkyrine's royal mark. The chain that had bound her mother after Elaria was taken. Elaria reached for it. Morel's ghost appeared beside her, faint now, almost dawn-thin. "You do not have to carry that." "No," Elaria whispered. "But someone has to open it." She placed the silver key into the queen's chain. It turned. The chain broke. Above the gate, Morel's ghost inhaled as if breathing for the first time since death. The broken moonbone crown on her brow lifted, dissolved into silver sparks, and flowed not onto Elaria's head, but into the Howling Gate. The gate changed. The black iron softened into moonlit silver. Conquest marks vanished. Wolf prayers from both kingdoms appeared side by side along the bars. The second gate, trapping the mercenaries, tightened, driving the oathless packs backward into the southern dark. Varesh's ashmouth in the cradle collapsed. His body remained trapped in the chainwheel above, alive, forced to hear the restored names echo through iron. By the time Elaria and Dacian returned to the courtyard, dawn had begun to pale the blood moon. No army charged. The northern wolves remained beyond the open gate, no longer kneeling, no longer attacking, waiting. The Valkyran soldiers stood with lowered weapons, shaken by truths too large to fit into old commands. Elaria walked to the center of the gate. The white pup limped beside her. The elder northern wolf bowed, but not to the ground this time. "Ellerin Merilith, will you come home?" Every eye turned to her. Elaria looked through the gate at the northern forest, where her mother's people waited. Then back at Valkarin, where the stones had held her suffering and her survival. "I will come," she said. The northern wolves lifted their heads, but not as a stolen child returned like property. The elder wolf's scarred face softened. Then as what? Elaria touched the sigil beneath her collarbone. As witness, as daughter, as the one who decides which gates stay open. Dacian stood several steps away, pale but upright, crownless beneath the fading moon. She turned to him. "And you?" His chasm at hers. "I rebuild what my crown broke. That will cost you." "It should." The answer settled between them, honest enough to hurt. Elaria stepped closer. The white pup stayed at her side. Dacian did not reach for her, though she saw the effort it took. His hands remained open, empty of crown and command. "You asked what I choose," she said. "Yes, I choose not to forgive quickly." His eyes darkened, not with anger, with acceptance. "Good. I choose not to be your redemption. I would not deserve you if I asked that." Her throat tightened. "And I choose," she said slowly, "to return to the north and learn the name they howled for me." Dacian nodded. Then she added, "But the gate stays open." For the first time that night, something like hope crossed his face. "Then I will meet you there," he said. "Not as your keeper, not as your king, as the man who cut one chain and must spend his life answering for the rest." Elaria looked at him for a long moment. Then she held out her hand. Dacian took it carefully, as if touching both wound and vow. The northern wolves did not cheer. Valkarin soldiers did not kneel. The moment was too fragile for triumph. But above them, the Howling Gate rang once not as a war bell, not as a death sentence, but as a promise that no child taken through it would ever again lose their name in silence. Elaria stepped through the open gate before dawn fully broke. This time, no one dragged her. This time, no chain held her. Behind her, Dacian stood crownless on Valkyrin stone. Before her, the northern forest opened, and for the first time in 20 years, the wolves did not howl for war. They howled her home.